Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here this morning for what's going to be, no doubt, a fantastic discussion with some really amazing, smart entrepreneurs and experts to talk about something I'm really excited about, the Global Youth Wellbeing Index, which I hope you are a little bit familiar with, everyone tuning in. My name is Nicole Golden, and I was the director of the project with the International Youth Foundation, which is here I am, as well as with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And of course, none of it could have been possible without the wonderful support from our friends at the Hilton Worldwide. And we're very excited to have someone from the Hilton team with us today. So just to let you all know who is with us besides me, we're going to sort of do a very quick introduction, give them a chance to wave and say hello, and then I'm going to come back and just give you all watching a very brief overview of the index, and then we're going to get really right into the conversation with our wonderful fellow Google Hangout panelists. I guess that's what we call each other. So we're very lucky to have with us today Conchita Galdon from Spain. She is an entrepreneur, and she works with an organization called Prentice Global, and she is also one of the Youth Action Net Fellows. The Youth Action Net is a wonderful program of International Youth Foundation that identifies and nurtures and supports a collaboration and a number of social entrepreneurs around the world. So we're very lucky and pleased that Conchita can join us today. So Conchita, give us a quick wave and say hello.
Hello. I'm delighted to be here with you as well. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Wonderful, thank you. We also have with us Cristina Velasco and Cristina Balcalso, mispronounced. Cristina is a youth policy researcher and expert with Youth Policy Lab. It's a great a think tank that really focuses on youth policies around the world. She is based in Berlin, and youth policy, she'll speak a bit more about it, but was thrilled to have their collaboration and input into the process. So Christina, give us a quick wave. Hello.
Hello, everybody from Berlin.
Thank you. We are also very thrilled to have with us today, again, from our wonderful colleagues at Hilton, Emma Pierce. Emma is a trainer with Hilton UK, so she's joining us from London. And I'm very excited to have the chance to see and meet her, and hopefully see her and meet her live in person next week when we'll be doing our European release of the index, which we're really excited about. So we're thankful that Emma can be with us. Emma, say hello.
Hi.
Hello. And we are also very, very thrilled to have with us from what looks to be very warm and sunny and making me very jealous, Mohammed Kasirsa. He is from Action for Fundamental Change and Development in Uganda. He is also a fabulous Youth Action Net Fellow, and we're just very thrilled to have him with us today to talk about how he views the index given some of the work he's doing with youth in Uganda. So we'll hear more from Mohammed, but a quick hello. I think, Mohammed, we might just want to double check on your microphone.
Hi everyone.
There we go.
Greetings from Kampala. Greetings from Kampala, Uganda.
We're so happy that you're able to join us. We may hopefully have another colleague or two jumping on if we can get through some technical difficulties. So hopefully if and when our friend Frederick is able to join us, we will get him going. But I did just want to take a few minutes before we get into a conversation about the index to give you all that are watching a very brief overview of what the Global Youth Wellbeing Index is and what's in it, and just a couple of the key findings that can really and hopefully inform our conversation. So as I mentioned, the index project was a collaboration between the Center for Strategic International Studies and the International Youth Foundation with support from Hilton. And it was an outgrowth of a commitment that was made at the Clinton Global Initiative, which some of you watching may be familiar with, a big gathering in New York every year under the Clinton Foundation to find solutions to global challenges. And we really believe that with 1.8 billion youth on the planet today, youth are not a challenge, but a critical opportunity for the world if we can identify where there are gaps and really make sure that young people are equipped and have the environment to succeed in all aspects of their lives. So this index was really created to be an assessment tool to provide a kind of summary view and a comparative view of how young people are doing around the world. We see youth and young people as one of the most principal audiences for the index, as well as, of course, policymakers, corporate and other kind of investors that can, change the reality, help change the reality for young people, as well as some of the many kind of project implementers that are working to improve the conditions for young people around the world. So just a couple of key facts about the index itself. We utilize data from a majority of public sources and some private sources as well, and we'll hear a little bit more from Christina later on some of the help that her organization did. The sample sizes vary, but youth are generally seen in the data, at least, as 12 to 25 years of age in terms of the data. But we all know that the sort of policies and programs that affect young people are very context specific, and so the range of young people that are sort of implicated, if you will, or hopefully included in this sort of analysis may be a little bit broader. This first ever inaugural Youth Wellbeing Index covers 30 countries from high to low income in the 5 major regions of the world, many of which are represented with us today. And the 30 countries that are included hold about 70% of the world's youth. So we actually think it's quite representative. The index has 40 indicators that are in 6 buckets, if you will, or domains as we call them. Education, economic opportunity, citizen participation, health, information and communications technology, and safety and security. The main findings, there's a few main findings, and again, we're going to get into more of the detail through the conversation. But interestingly, and this may not necessarily be surprising, but I think the scale of what we found is that, unfortunately, a majority of the world's youth are not necessarily experiencing the levels of well-being and are being equipped and prepared to thrive, and that they should. I mean, actually, about 85% of the youth represented in this index are living in countries that had below average scores in terms of the overall index. So that's concerning. Also, we found that even where youth are doing quite well overall, there are areas and pockets where there may be particular issues. So in Spain, for example, Conchita, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about this. Spain does quite well overall in 8th place, but on youth economic opportunity and employment in particular is a huge challenge. On the other side, even where youth may not necessarily be thriving overall, Uganda, sits in the lower end of the rankings overall, but there's a number of bright spots where youth are really thriving, and we'll talk a bit more about some of that as well. So we really need to be able to learn from where things are going well and how we can make sure that at least continues. Interestingly, in the index we include some subjective indicators, so indicators that are based on surveys of young people that ask for their satisfaction levels and their levels of optimism on a variety of things. And we find that there's sometimes a disconnect between how young people feel and what, quote, reality says they should feel. So that's something that was very interesting in lots of the different domains. We saw this in different countries, and that's something we'll hope to talk a little bit more about. Sort of lastly, in sort of the overall top findings, just to say, and again, maybe not surprisingly, across all of the countries, the average scores were sort of highest in health and weakest in economic opportunity. And the most spread, the most diverse, information and communications technology. So again, something we'll talk a little bit more about, and of course there are outliers on each of those areas, but just to say, it seems that some of those global investments that we've been making on the health side, in particular around young people, are paying off. And again, we're unfortunately seeing, in these numbers, the realities of how young people were so affected by the global recession and some of the ongoing challenges to economic growth and opportunity. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. As far as the overall results, as we said, hopefully those of you that are tuning in have had a chance to look at the index, to look at the rankings, all the reports, the information, the interactive data is available on youthindex.org. And there's been already a lot of Twitter action around Youth Wellbeing Index. So again, won't spend the time going too much into the overall rankings for now, because hopefully we'll get through that in some of the conversation. So just to sort of end, and then we'll really want to dive into our conversation with just a couple of the recommendations and next steps, which again I think hopefully our panelists will be able to pick up on. While we definitely see this index being utilized at a national level, I think there were some key themes that came up that we'd like to see kind of everyone think about when they're thinking about their sort of youth policies and programs. One, of course, advance youth voices and participation. It goes without saying. I think, especially with this group, we'll love to hear your thoughts on that. But I think that's something that we are committed to and saw as critical. Again, promote deeper dive and targeted research and analysis. There were some data gaps, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Interestingly enough, we saw the connections within the index, again, so for example, between education and economic opportunity, just as one example. So the idea that to consider integrated programs and policies that sort of address this the interconnected nature of youth lives. And lastly, to continue to advance the body of data, particularly as we're thinking about the post-2015 development agenda. So that's a brief overview. I could go on for hours talking about it, but I'm much more interested to hear from our panel, as I'm sure are our watchers and joiners today. So with that, I'm going to start off with a kind of general question that I'm going to ask each of you to kind of comment on briefly. And in doing so, maybe also just give us an extra word or two about your work. I did a very quick introduction. And this question is, again, to all of you, and I'll sort of call on you in order, is what surprised you so far from what you've seen about the index? Was anything, particularly kind of stand out as surprising? Just kind of a nice way to kind of break the ice as we get into it. So, Conchita, I'm going to come to you first and ask your thoughts.
So, well, the most surprising thing to me that we can talk about more deeper later is the disconnect between education and economic opportunities here in Spain, and I can dig deeper on that later. The other thing that I found striking is in terms of youth outlook. I found youth to be a lot more pessimistic than I was expecting them to be. So the fact that once you incorporate the perceptions in the index, it actually brings scores down is something that I wasn't expecting. And linking it to my present work, most of what I do is related to entrepreneurship, and it might be that I have a biased environment in the sense that I work with young entrepreneurs, both commercial or normal entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, and maybe entrepreneurs by nature tend to be more optimistic, and probably youth out there who are not entrepreneurs are not that optimistic, but I was definitely surprised by that, and it actually makes me sad, because if you can't be optimistic when you're young, then when are you supposed to be optimistic?
Wow, that is a great opening comment. Thank you, Christina. And I should say we're extra, Christina, Conchita, we're extra grateful for you joining us, given I'm sure what's a very busy week for you. It's Global Entrepreneurship Week, so I'm sure many of you may be engaged in that, Conchita, given your work especially. So we're excited and grateful that you're able to join us this particular week as well. And, you know, I'm sure your colleagues will have something to say about this point between the sometimes disconnect between the economic and or the link at least between the economic and the citizen participation, and where in Spain there may be a lack of optimism, but we saw some optimism elsewhere. And maybe on that note, Mohammed, I'm going to come to you next for some of your perhaps surprising thoughts.
I was shocked when I saw that Uganda is doing well in terms of entrepreneurship, where he said that on the other hand, Uganda scores comparatively well in economic opportunity driven by very high levels of youth entrepreneurship and a positive outlook. When I saw that, I was shocked because I deal in youth entrepreneurship, training young people and being the next entrepreneurs. And every day, one of the songs that is sung around the whole country is unemployment. And one of the things that young people are demonstrating about on the streets, young people from university, everyone is looking for employment, the educated and uneducated, and young people riot almost every day. I mean, because they say they're unemployed. So when I looked at this, I was like, okay, Uganda, like seriously? I was like, wow, I'm a little bit shocked. But you know, I try to cool down. So that was it.
Well, no, I mean, that's so interesting to hear. And I'm going to pick up on that very quickly. So do you think that maybe because the unemployment situation is a challenge, that many young Ugandans may be going and being entrepreneurial, whether it's because they are optimistic or maybe it's because they feel compelled to in order to create a livelihood for themselves and their families?
I think it's because that very many young Ugandans are optimistic, and actually every day, whoever comes out, for example, the president or any influential people, they're encouraging entrepreneurship on the news, on the radio, on TV. They're talking about everyone being involved in entrepreneurship, like having something to sell.
Yeah.
They're encouraging people, so they are very optimistic on being the next entrepreneurs. So I think that's it. They are trying to work on mindsets of the young people and everyone generally to be entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's terrific. You're so smiling. I'm just loving this. All right, we're gonna continue on. We're gonna get some thoughts next.
Thank you.
Emma, what surprised you? Can you just double check your mic for us?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, brilliant.
There we go.
I think one of the things that really took me by surprise looking at the index was within the economic opportunity section. And I think that, having this being the first time I'm involved in an event like this, I think it's great because I work with a lot of young people within Hilton coming into Hilton. And I think what I'm seeing is, just that word expectation when it comes to income and wealth. And I think that there is so much pressure out there in the business world to, especially for the different generations, when you're looking at someone like myself who's a millennial, and then looking down to the younger generations, and they're expecting things a lot quicker. They're being asked to work faster, they're being asked to work slightly harder, and with that change as well. And when you've got the generation that wants it faster, they're looking at what that income looks like in their family. There's that pressure. And I think especially where we have people coming from more well-established families as well, there's more pressure. And I think, there's so much around in terms of colleges and universities and, what people expect when they join companies. I think we have to look at how we're setting up the about when they're going out into the business world, and making sure that we're giving them the right expectation and giving them a heads up on what to expect. And, you're not going to receive a job promotion in the first 6 months. And I think when I'm teaching my candidates a management development program, I often do an exercise around what they expect once they've completed the management development program. Sometimes, depending on the different department they work in, especially food and beverage, what they're saying to me is that they expect promotion in the next 3 to 6 months. So definitely, I think being part of a generation that's moving very fast and working with different generations around me, I can see what those expectations look like, and who actually feels they're not receiving what they should be, and those who actually feel that they're receiving above and beyond. So it's just really interesting to see what we offer, not just in hospitality, but globally to our young workers.
It's so interesting. The whole expectations gap is something actually that I've commented on with regard to employment in particular, and I talked about it on both sides of sort of young people's expectations as well as employer expectations. And I think you hit on one of the things that we're saying, that we really see this index as informing the conversation and bringing different stakeholders to the conversation and help identifying and perhaps in bringing some common understandings around where the challenges are between young people and government and investors. It can be a tool to kind of help forge maybe partnerships or dialogue, policy level dialogue, and real action-oriented dialogue to help change the case. So really interesting comments. Thank you. Christina, your thoughts and surprises as someone that is particularly that was sort of intimately involved in the index.
Thank you. Yeah, I just I'll give a brief background on exactly what we do, because on the panel here we are sort of a bit of an outlier in the sense of sort of our representation. And just to brief, we are currently a youth think tank, which is aiming to build a global evidence base on youth policy. And so what that means is that we both conduct original research in regards specifically to youth policies, youth legislations, in terms of regulatory frameworks at the international level, as well as at the country level. But we also engage in a lot of data collation exercises. And so I actually, for me, I mean, there were many surprises, and particularly in some of the rankings, which I'm sure we'll go into as a group in a moment. But for me as a researcher, what sort of was very interesting to see was this type of data collation exercise and what it tells us about the state of data on youth right now in the world. And there is a lot of bright spots in the sense that we have very excellent data on youth-specific indicators relating to education, for example, unemployment, which is also generally up to date and for nearly every country in the world. And as well as things relating to health, we have many indicators and comprehensive markers on health. But of course, as we all know, these are only sort of two very fundamental but only partial components of everything that makes up what it means to have a good well-being. And so, of course, one of the ones which had struck me was that citizen participation. We're actually lacking a lot of really solid data on it. From the calculations here, I applaud Nicole and her group for being able to sort of work with what they had. But of course, 3 of the indicators come from private surveys, which are mostly subjective as well. And so it's curious to see something like citizen participation, which all of us are agreeing is actually such a fundamental component, is really under-researched in that sense. And that was something that was very striking for us.
It's such a great point. So I'm going to stay with you for a minute and toss you a follow-up, Christina, on that. You hit on it, but as somebody that's been, that's knee-deep in this, and as you said, that's working with governments and organizations to craft policies, if there were going to be a future iteration, what do you think would be some of the most important elements or tweaks, if you will, to the sort of model as it stands to advance, the index even further?
I mean, I think in terms of its first iteration, I think that it's really an excellent effort because it is fairly comprehensive in the sense of really taking stock of all of the existing research and the databases that we have. It would be interesting to see in terms of using perhaps what exists at national level for data availability. I mean, of course, then you run into issues with consistency across the board, but it would be interesting to know, for example, with some of the NEET calculations, how in some cases some countries have been calculating that themselves and, trying to look a bit more at how those may be useful or not useful. I think future iterations in terms of the actual methodology, I think, as it stands, it's a very good exercise, but probably what the next sort of step would be, even beyond the index, is the analysis part. So like you had mentioned, sort of the real deep dives in terms of looking at the context. Because of course, similar to other well-known indexes such as the Human Development Index, it gives us a very useful tool in the sense of seeing where a country is in relation to other countries, as well as in relation to itself, perhaps 1 year before. But I think that the interesting thing then is actually then going really into that particular country and seeing, why is it that this score is shaping out this way, and what else can we learn about that? And so I wouldn't necessarily say changing in terms of methodology, but really sort of pushing further in terms of more analysis.
That's such a great point, and on that, I'm going to come over to you. Excuse me, Mohammed. On that, one of the points that we make is that, we see this as a kind of initial exercise and a framework to get the conversation and the analysis and the action points going, but that, we know that there are often sort of, differentiated, if you will, challenges for different segments of the very diverse youth population that's in any country. So in particular, Mohammed, we think about rural versus urban young people and some of, the differences that might be seen there, or, young men versus young women, and that's something I might, come back to Conchita and Emma on. So I'm wondering, Mohammed, if you have sort of thoughts on that. I mean, you're in Kampala. What are your thoughts on sort of how, this what some of the more nuanced, challenges and opportunities for young people in Uganda might be?
Currently, I think empowering young people with practical skills, in terms of employable skills. With this, I run Boise Youth Employment Center. It is a big, where I was in the compound, so the battery was running out, so right now I'm in. So what we do here is we look at empowering young people, 1,000 young people every year, both boys and girls, though the numbers of the girls always outweigh the boys, or the male young people. And what we look at is we discover that there is a lot of employment that is going on versus the education rate in Uganda. Where I come from in Boise, closely half of the population, 50%, more than 50% of the population, which is 90,000 people. It's the most densely populated slum area, and half of this population did not attain primary school. So what to do to such a population, which is in around every slum community in around Kampala, because 3/3 of the whole population of Kampala lives in the slums. And if you're to tackle unemployment versus education, you have to provide a solution that joins both of them, that tries to address both of them. And what we do is we provide young people with leadership, entrepreneurship, vocational, and leadership skills, and financial literacy skills, sorry. And it's a 4-month course where a young person comes in, they learn computer literacy, but as well learn graphic art and design, how to make business cards, flyers, banners. We train young people in catering and food services, hotel management. We train young people in fashion designing, tailoring and fashion designing. They come, they learn how to make a dress. We train them in photography and video editing. How do you hold a camera? Just practical skills. Hold a camera like this, press it, get it on, get it off, make a long shot, make a shot, make a upper close. They take a picture and they learn how to operate, how to start up a studio as a business. So we train young people in hairdressing and cosmetology, and we also give them skills in art and local craft on how to make all those things. But this is a practical training that a young person, no matter which age limit or no matter which education level they are, actually have young people who can't speak and write. But this is a practical skill. You get a young person and train them how to fix a mobile phone. You tell them, open it, have this screwdriver, open it, fix it, touch it here, and everything is just practical. So we believe if we are to address unemployment, we have to provide young people with practical skills. And as well, during this process, we give them entrepreneurship skills. Learning a video and how to get a camera on and how to take a picture is one thing, but learning how to use it as a business is also another. So we provide them with financial literacy skills and entrepreneurship skills. How do you start a business as a cameraman? How do you operate using the skills that you've learned, the vocational skills, as a saloon hairdresser or someone, and you do it as a business? Saving money, where can you access money in terms of loans if you want to boost your business, or in terms of promotion. So we teach them those things, and we've seen young people who do not know how to read and write being the next entrepreneurs, and they have started up businesses. So we recently graduated 600 young people, and we are yet to start on another course of 300 young people. So we have a huge center where we empower them, and we think our solution, as far as the challenges in Uganda of addressing employment, is working. And our big vision in the next 5 years is to have at least each slum community has an employment center that provides vocational leadership and entrepreneurship skills. And as well, if we can have more support in the next 20 years, we can put a youth center in every district in around the country.
Youth center for everyone. No, it's so fascinating, your comments. And Conchita, I'm going to come to you next. Mohammed, you hit on so many things that we saw in the index. So in particular, two things I want to ask Conchita to comment on, given the work she does. But one is this interconnection, within the economic opportunity realm between financial inclusion, the enabling environment for young entrepreneurs and young people to be successful in business, and that that interconnection was something that we saw within that economic opportunity domain. So I'm curious, Conchita, for your thoughts on do you see that connection, and what are some of the bigger challenges for young entrepreneurs? And also, and Emma, I'm going to ask you to comment on this too. Mohammed talked about mobile phones, right, and the importance of technology. And so in the work that you're doing, Conchita, with young entrepreneurs and just in general, we saw that interplay, of course, between success and access to ICT and ability, whether it's in education, really the connection to all aspects of young people's lives, which is why we gave it its own sort of domain, its own pillar in the index. So Conchita, I'm going to ask for your thoughts on that one, and then Emma, I'm going to come to you on that and something else as well. So get your thoughts going. Conchita.
So that's a lot of things that you asked. Let's hope that I remember them all. Okay. So there is an incredible connection between use of ICT and participation and ability to develop successful startups. The first comment that I would like to make in this sense is that most young people that are native users of ICTs, they are beyond this divide between digital and offline existence. They have integrated both things so intimately that they are beyond using alias or nicknames or whatever. They have one identity, one life that evolves on digital, on analogical, and they don't care, and it's the same person, it's the same life, just doing everything. So both on participation, being citizens, finding their voice, getting educated beyond what their own educational system can offer, learning languages, getting professional experiences beyond what exists within their environment. Access to ICTs is humongous. The other thing is when it comes to starting up, regardless of whether you're young or old, just access to ICTs improves your cost structure by so much in terms of reach, management, coordination. The kinds of things that you can do with little money are again enormous. So there is a huge connection between smart use of ICTs. It doesn't mean that you need to be a developer, but just like a sophisticated user level kind of thing will or actually helps them start up not only more but more wisely when they do as well. So that's very important. But I do see here in Spain what we're talking about, which is this difference between falling in love with a product that you want to sell and actually being able to create a business around this product. And that's where financial literacy comes in, and that's a big thing. And also here, I think our educational system is not doing a good job in terms of teaching our kids how to structure business, how to deal with cash flow. I don't think most of our 20-year-olds would be able to properly explain what a mortgage is or how interest rates for a mortgage are calculated, let alone any loan that they might ask for in a bank, or let alone calculating valuation for their startups, or talking or making any sense in front of an investor. So also, education is not just a matter of how many years you are sitting inside a university. We are very good at putting our kids into universities for many years. I'm not sure that we are so good at making a productive use of those years of them sitting in our universities.
No, it's so fascinating. The skills gap you talk about is something that's coming up, really all over. Emma, I'm going to come to you next, and something you actually touched on the skills gap as well. But sticking on the technology piece, how do you see technology and ICT being important, not only in the workplace, but it's interesting in the UK. The UK is one of those countries that falls in terms of participation. So I'm curious your thoughts on where technology and ICT can be a platform for British youth and young people anywhere to better engage civically, politically, and just in general. So sort of a two-part question.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Because I'm thinking about my headphones and just using my laptop. Is that any better? Can everybody hear me okay?
Can you double check the mic for a moment? And while let's try one more time with Emma.
Is this better?
Better, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. So yeah, so I think ICT just under. I mean, again, I touch on generation thing again because I know how growing up, my education when I was a young worker, how technology influenced what I was doing, what I was learning, what I was progressing with people around me, and also the people that I develop now, and how I'm very heavily involved with the National Apprenticeship Consultant, which we started in October 2012, and my cluster had about, we've always had the highest number of apprentices, and we're very supportive of it. But I think what I can see is, I think there's two parts to me to this answer. There's what is, for example, my company and possibly other big corporate companies out there in the UK offer in terms of IT support when young workers come into our businesses, and how how it impacts their learning. So I think what we definitely try to do at Hilton is offer like a blended learning approach to help fill that skill gap. We focus on learning that allows them to have sort of on-the-job experience as well as e-learning approach as well. So, and especially in hospitality, I think sometimes so many iPads around there, mobile phones, televisions. You want an answer to something, you can on the computer. However, what I feel is more important is that face-to-face communication. Sometimes I say to our apprentices, and I say, I'm sure if I asked you to go and text a customer or a guest, you'd be able to give them amazing customer service. However, if I ask you to go and speak face-to-face with a customer, that's when you're going to struggle. So it's very evident that maybe sometimes I think we channel everything too much through IT, and actually we're not bringing that just face-to-face skill into our education to help them plan for the future. And although I know technology is advancing and it's going to be that way, we still have to have that level of face-to-face communication. I know within my role, to get where I am today and to progress further within myself and as well as the people that I train, they're going to have to be able to deal with face-to-face interaction. So it isn't relevant how advanced ICT is going to be and how much it definitely has a positive impact on our businesses. We still need to be able to handle that one-to-one communication and be able to communicate positively with the right tone of voice, with the right body language, with the right eye contact. And simple things like that are just simple skills I can see in the UK and probably in other countries as well. I'm always trying to bring that home. And I think the impact of having a blended learning does offer all generations that we have within our corporate business in the UK, blended learning approach, which I think is really good. And I think we do have that approach where we are saying to them, you're going to have to talk to someone face to face as well as an email. Emails, when we hit the reply to all, you start thinking, why does someone not just pick up the phone and have a conversation with me? And I think, I know from I have a nephew who I know before he's 1 year old.
Emma,
Oh, hello?
So you're making sure that while we're sort of leveraging mass communication and mass technology, that we're also, we're preparing people to engage on a very human level, and that we sort of remember the one, and that we're able to kind of communicate and really speak our voice and communicate with each other. And to that point, I'm going to come back to Christina. Who, obviously you do a lot of work on participation, on engagement. It's an important chunk of what you do from a policy perspective and from a sort of analytical perspective. So, on that, what does sort of meaningful participation from young people mean to you? How do you get it? How do you, advise governments, companies, and young people to make those relationships, youth-adult relationships, and to make participation really meaningful?
That's a very good question. It's something which we are constantly probing and thinking about in terms of, what does meaningful participation look like? I think that currently in a lot of youth policy, governmental processes, and particularly in international development, you'll see quite a lot of sort of lip service paid to the idea of youth participation. And often, you'll see nearly in every youth policy out there, of which there are 122 governments today which have a document which is called something like a youth policy. And there will always have some sort of emphasis on participation, but the question is, what does that really look like? I feel like it's quite clear when we see that participation can be tokenistic. So oftentimes you will have young people who perhaps are sitting at a table with legislators, with policymakers, but perhaps not necessarily representative. They often are from only elite circles, which happen to also be plugged in enough to be with the government, that sort of thing. On the other hand, you perhaps also have very large, almost crowdsourced type participation, where you have a lot of young people who are asked to fill out a survey, and they're able to sort of say, among the 5 best ice cream flavors, which one would you like the best, and how does that lead us forward in our country? And so there has to be somewhere in between, and I think that sort of the best examples that we've seen have been where governments have actually really reached out to civil society, and where you see, of course, this tends to go towards groups of young people who are already organized, but they often are the ones who actually have been, seeking to have a place to speak for a very, very long time, and it's not just the young people who are part of established councils, who are part of political parties already, but it's young people who often are the ones out on the street and the ones who are, holding up placards. And so I don't really have a very good answer in terms of what meaningful youth participation looks like, but I'm hoping that, the more we look into it, the closer we'll get to that.
It's a great answer. Thank you. I often say, I use this cooking analogy. You might have heard me say before that I feel like or baking analogy. I feel like sometimes people just say they'll add youth and mix. Like you have one of these baking recipes and you have your eggs and you have your water and you say, oh, just add youth and mix. And, that's not enough, right? That's not going to work. And, during your comments, I see Mohammed and I saw Conchita, sort of nodding along. So, Mohammed, I'm going to come back to you and give you a chance to comment and also ask you a kind of cheeky question, which was, if you found yourself with stuck in an elevator for, oddly enough, you found yourself stuck in the elevator with the president, and you had a 2-minute ride, what would you tell him? What would you think what would you want him to do for young people? And then Emma and Conchita, you're going to get the same question, so you have a little bit of an extra chance to think about it. So we're actually, unfortunately, running out of time very quickly. So we might sort of use this as our sort of closing thought from each of you.
Hey, Mr. President, my name is Muhammad Tisilisa from Kampala, Uganda. I work for the betterment of young people and entrepreneurship. And my dream is to see at least maybe 50% of this world's young population having access to jobs and better employment. So, Mr. President, I would like to have solutions in practical skills, leadership and entrepreneurship, plus access to financial resources and partners. Thank you.
Very eloquent. If I were the president, I would respond and act with immediacy. Emma, any thoughts from you? You find yourself with the Prime Minister. What do you tell him on behalf of British young people?
Okay, so I think, what would I ask the Prime Minister when it comes to young people? I probably would try to sneak in more than one question because I'm greedy. But I definitely would focus on how we promote the welfare and safety of young people. How do we continue to allow them to learn taking challenging educational activities? And what do those activities look like in 5 to 10 years to come? How do we enable them to make informed decisions and pursue those choices that are available to them and support that participation through active involvement in the society? So it's all about helping them become independent in a fair and inclusive way, and actually respecting their contribution when they give it a go.
Sounds good. I'd respond. Conchita.
So I would ask, what's the use of an educational system that ranks second in this ranking that gets us to position 25 in economic opportunity for the youth? That's the first thing I would ask. And with respect to that, 3 things. It's absurd and outrageous that our young leave or graduate from grad school at 22 years old without having had any relevant professional experience. This is stupid in either the broadest sense of the word. So access professional life a lot earlier during grad school, even before that, because this is something stupid that we're doing here. Second stupid thing that we're doing here, we're producing graduate students like we're producing sausage. We need a better vocational training program that is dignified, that is recognized by society, where doing vocational training is not worse than going to grad school, because if that's your vocation, that's what you want to do, that's where your dignity is. You don't need to become a useless lawyer. The best butcher is a lot better than the worst lawyer. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, women in science, math, and tech careers. The digital divide starts very early. The fact that during secondary education in Spain, you need to choose tracks. And a lot of women at that age, when they are still 15, 16, they are choosing humanities versus technical careers. And then when they go to grad school, they don't go into engineering, they don't go into math, they don't go into science. I do not believe this has nothing to do with culture and education. I do not believe that women are less prepared for math and engineering than men are. So we are clearly doing something wrong. We are keeping our women away from the professions of the future where there's no unemployment. So three things: women in science, professional experience way before, and vocational training in Spain.
Well, you need a long elevator ride, so I hope you definitely find at the top of the skyscraper. And it's such a good point. It's interesting on the science and math point, and some of the more gender disaggregated numbers that we see in terms of learning outcomes. We see that when young women and girls go into science and math fields, they actually, in many places, score better and perform better once they're in those fields. And so it's such an excellent point, and something we absolutely I personally believe in as well. So I'm really glad you raised it. Christina, you have what do they do?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'm currently living in Germany, but I'm a native Canadian. And gosh, if I was in the same elevator as Prime Minister Harper, I just don't even know where I would start. But I think probably what I would have to kind of implore is the idea that, yes, Prime Minister, we are a well-off country. Yes, we have, are blessed with natural resources, and yes, we have friendly relations with, many of the large superpowers. But we cannot rely on our laurels to assume that just because we have all of these resources and the money that our young people are taken care of. And I think that would be the big thing. We actually do, we're not part of the Wellbeing Index, but we do fare very high in youth outcomes, but yet we have no cohesive vision for youth. We have no national youth policy. We have scatters of youth all around the country that aren't able to access services, that are drowning in student debt, that are still suffering from persistent unemployment. And so I would say, don't forget about this generation.
Oh, that's such a great point. And again, that's something that we did see, as you mentioned, Canada not necessarily in the index, but again, that's something we saw, that even where, that point we made, that even where sort of, there are resources and, general sort of development and levels of well-being are high, that doesn't mean that young people everywhere or all young people are necessarily doing well. There may be health gaps or education gaps or, criminality. So important. So last question for each of you is, again, we've been so grateful to have such a diversity of younger voices responding to the index, and most of our observers and joiners today, I think, have been young people. And as I said at the start, youth and young people worldwide are a critical stakeholder in this index. So what would you say to your fellow peers, and that why should your peers sort of look at this index, and how do you think they can use it? Why do you think this is an important product, an important tool for the world's young people? So that'll be our sort of final word question, and I'm going to start with Emma, and then we will hear all of your last thoughts. And as we go into this just to thank you, but I'll come back at the end. Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if I asked that question, I'm not sure how if I'd get positive or constructive or maybe slightly negative answers. Who knows what answers I would get? But I think that it's always really important to know that we have to be aware of the opportunities for young people within our countries, and also open our eyes to what's going on in other countries to see what we can learn from them. And I think Mohammed made a really good point, and I was sort of just taken back by some of the sharing that he did with regards to teaching these practical skills, whether it be financial or how to fix a camera or a phone, just more practical skills that they can use that maybe, like I said, in that moment, more practical learning. But I think that, from my experience, having started as a part-time F&B assistant where I am today, it's about looking at what that index is telling us. What areas, where are our doors and windows of opportunity for people as individuals, but also for us as companies? And I think it's looking at maybe working differently around giving people, the young people that have the right attitude, and supporting those who maybe don't have the right attitude, and not just seeing what's right in front of us, it's black or white, but looking beyond the black and white image and looking at what some of the colours. And I'm a very visual person, so I always refer to things as black or white or colours. But I think it's looking harder at what we can do to encourage people to look at opportunities, what are available within that plan. I think it's helping them understand it. I think if I was to just give that document, I would need to take time to understand it even further myself before I expect someone else to understand it. I think sometimes that's what scares us as corporate businesses. We just go across the top. We don't delve in deeper because maybe we don't fully understand it ourselves. So I think using that research to help them understand the opportunities. A lot of the comments that my fellow panel have made today have made some really good points about being more financially aware, supporting diversity, using female and male skills that we can all. I'm not sure maths and science is my expert remit, but I'm willing to learn and do the work. So.
Thank you, Emma. Mohammed, why do you think young people need to look at this Youth Wellbeing Index?
Yeah, first of all, for me as myself, I was so excited seeing and reading through all these pages. I was a little bit, disappointed when I read the email that there were 25 and there were closely about 75 pages, right? 45 pages, something like that. So, but anyway, it was interesting, all parts. I made sure that I was reading through all parts. And most times, young people, for example, in Uganda, if we are to tackle the local challenges in Uganda, we need to think globally and act local. So it's a brilliant idea. It's a good document that I would advise every young person to read, to know how the world thinks, to know how things are working in a different country around the world, in USA, China, in Brazil, in UK, in Germany. I mean, so that you can be either able to replicate, to have that understanding as you address a local issue. For me, I was so excited, and I think, yeah, every young person should go and read this index.
All right,
That's
see you on the next commercial. Christina, why should young people look at the index and use it?
Well, my message would probably be out there to the young people who are also, who are the activists, who are the ones that are trying to call out their governments, and to say, let the numbers talk for themselves. And I think that this is something that we really want to push and also to empower, is that research such as this and data such as this exists, and they can be really used as a powerful tool to hold your governments to account. And I think that the more young people are aware of these types of statistics, of all of the information that's out there for them, the stronger they'll be to be able to really, sort of demand for better youth outcomes. So I would say, again, to let the numbers talk, use evidence when you are calling your governments to task, and do your research.
That's great. Thank you. Conchita, last thoughts from you.
I completely agree with Christina. What can't be measured can't be improved. So I think this index is super important in that sense, hands down. And I think young people should use this to be informed, to know what reality looks like in their country and how it compares to countries around them, so that it should hopefully inspire them to action, but not just random action, but it should inspire them to informed action, which they wouldn't be able to do without access to hard data like this. So thank you very much for your effort. This is super useful.
Well, thank you all.
If I could champion like a little bit, the other thing I did bring out so well was, like Christina said, in Uganda, because advocacy is done so much by the politicians, and they have made it for Ugandans to think poverty, unemployment, poor education is a Ugandan thing. Yet it's a global thing, and whenever we go to these forums, get an opportunity to speak to young people in universities, we tell them, hey guys, look, unemployment is not Ugandan. It's a global challenge, and this is what you have to understand. Believe you me, it is, if you don't want to take it, but that's the truth. So thank you so much. This is great, and I think for me, if it's ready, I'll just apply to every Ugandan that I can reach. Thank you so much. It's a good job. Big up IYF and count.
Thank you. Well, on that note, again, thank you all for participating. Thank you all out there listening. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. And please continue to engage with the index, youthindex.org, hashtag Youth Wellbeing Index on Twitter. We look forward to comments and questions and dialogue. And if you happen to be in London for any UK watchers, please join us for the European release next week. More information and registration available on the Index website. So thanks again to IYF, of course to Hilton, and to our colleagues at CSIS for supporting this. And again, thanks to you all. It's been great.
Thank you.
Stop.